Good day, everyone. So today, I will be presenting the paper on a bibliometric analysis on the application of best management practices against soil erosion. So to introduce the broader global problem, land degradation pertains to the deterioration of soil properties resulting in decline of crop productivity, as shown in this figure. In fact, more than 3.4 million square kilometers, or about 24% of global arable land, is suffering from severe erosion, making soil erosion as one of the major contributors to the land degradation processes. So, soil erosion refers to the gradual process of movement and transport of the upper layer of soil, or called topsoil. And wind and the water are the main driving force, but soil erosion by water or rainfall-induced erosion affects the greatest land area. Furthermore, it's globally more studied. And these are the different types of soil erosion by water, which we have splash, sheet, reel, and gully erosions. And the resulting transported and detached soil particles cause sedimentation to a nearby water body. And there are several factors affecting soil erosion. So we have climate, soil properties, topography, land cover, and human activities. And sometimes human activities are related to land use change. And among these factors, we have climate and land use change or human activities to be the most critical factors contributing to soil erosion. And shown in this figure is the average potential soil erosion in Asia across different continents for the 20th century. And as we can see for Asia, it has been steadily increasing. And then this figure further supports that particular statement. Most of the Asian countries and other countries within the tropics are exposed to high soil erosion, as we can see in this figure. This implies the necessity of controlling soil erosion. And one of the most prominent approaches is called the best management practices. So the concept of BMPs were first ideated for agricultural land management way back in 1949, as quoted, to restore a more favorable plant cover and soil structure if we wish to maintain land and stream conditions to serve our present and future needs for usable water. And for its long existence, BMPs have been extensively used and broadly applied, transitioning its operational definition to encompass both non-structural and structural approaches. However, collectively, BMPs refer to a practice or combination of practices to be the most effective means of minimizing non-point source pollution to achieve water quality goals in a particular watershed. So, relating BMPs against soil erosion and sedimentation, BMPs protect surfaces, divert surface runoff, and capture sediments. Some of the categories of BMPs are the following. So we have here for agricultural BMPs, we have vegetated strips, contour tillage, and grassed waterways. For the forestry BMPs, we have straw mulch or slash, reforestation, and water bars. And finally, for the structural BMPs, we have detention basins, check dams, and silt fences. So in the existing literature, there are many studies that evaluated the impacts of BMPs in a study area against both soil erosion and sedimentation. However, to the knowledge of the authors, there have been no bibliometric review conducted for understanding the impacts of the published studies in preventing soil erosion. So with that said, the main objective of this paper was to analyze the bibliometric data of various research on the application of BMPs against soil erosion. And moreover, this study also aimed to reveal other themes that has received increased attention and emerging trends related to BMPs and soil erosion. And this is the methodological framework as shown. So from the Scopus database, it was further using these keywords, the following. The authors used CorText and VOSviewer to produce the following outputs and conduct the bibliometric analysis. So from the gathered studies, these are the top 20 occurring keywords, and all of them are related to soil erosion and BMPs, as we can see in here. And yielding the keyword co-occurrence network map, we have this particular figure for the term analysis. So primarily shown are the terms related to the environmental impacts of applying BMPs, including conservation practices, conservation management. We also have environmental protection and water supply. And another cluster in this particular figure refers to the dependent variables upon evaluating BMPs. So we have here nitrogen, phosphorus, and nutrients as an example. So they are also often quantified when evaluating BMPs. And lastly, another cluster refers to the tools and models when conducting a study on BMPs against soil erosion. So specific terms that we have in here include the Universal Soil Loss Equation, or USLE, and Soil and Water Assessment Tool, as shown in here. So within this particular region as well, other terms are related to these methods either as input factors or outputs. So such as the following: sediment yield, sediment transport, rainfall, soil loss, and the likes. And in terms of the number of publications throughout the year, it can be observed that there is an increasing trend on the number of publications since the start of the millennium. So meanwhile, for the location of these studies, we have here mostly of the studies concentrated on the developed countries such as the USA and China, as we can see in here. And lastly, limited studies conducted on Southeast Asian countries are very limited, despite the fact that Southeast Asian countries are highly susceptible to soil erosion. And in this particular figure, only Malaysia, in this one, is the only Southeast Asian representative. So this highly implies a wide research gap for the Philippines when it comes to implementing BMPs for soil erosion. Next is we have this contingency matrix between the key terms and journals of publication. So the darker shade of red depicts a strong correlation, whereas a darker shade of blue depicts a weak correlation. So it is surprising in this one that there is a weak relationship for BMP in this one, and Journal of Soil and Water Conservation, since BMPs directly affect both soil and water qualities. And a probable good reason for that is the concentration of BMPs published articles under the Agricultural Water Management and Journal of Environmental Management. So another notable result is the high correlation between soil erosion here and signs of the total environment, as shown here. So that suggests that other parameters, including soil organic matter, total nitrogen, total phosphorus, are quantified as well. And finally, we have a strong correlation of non-point source pollution here to that of Journal of the American Water Resources Association. So combining that fact and weak correlation observed to the other journals, it implies that an emerging topic related to BMPs and non-point pollution can be done for future studies. So next is we have this particular illustration, which allows deeper understanding for the development or evolution of key terms among the collected studies. So primarily, it's worth noting that non-point pollution in this time period were mostly attributed to agricultural pollutants. And when related to construction sites, it transformed in here to stormwater runoff and non-point pollution, which is often connected to urban areas or massive urbanization in the as a land use or as a study area. So next is this particular agricultural practice or conservation tillage. It has developed throughout the years into considering other management practices and applied at a larger or watershed scale, as shown here and then here for more recent studies. And the other terms shown here are connected to the modeling such as SWAT, as previously mentioned, and evaluating BMPs through ecosystem services here and multi-criteria analysis here. So the anything other else are examples of BMPs and its particular modeling and its application. And moving forward, among the collected studies, these three BMP types were the most applied, and we have here agricultural BMPs, forestry BMPs, and structural BMPs, as previously shown earlier. So we have agricultural BMPs occupying about 2/3 of the total from the collected studies. And within this particular BMPs, we have vegetative strips to be the most employed, modeled, and simulated among its relevant other BMPs, and followed by contour tillage and no tillage. So it's worth noting that other studies that did not utilize a computer model conducted either a field or a lab experiment for their particular publication. And most of them were published earlier in the 2000s. And furthermore, while this figure shows the most applied BMP types, it does not automatically translate to the same output efficiency when applied locally. So it's still very important to assess BMPs at site-specific conditions. So these are the following conclusions to reiterate the major findings. A growing interest in the topic was observed as the number of publications have been progressively increasing since the start of the millennium. The key co-occurrence network map indicated the following clusters. We have environmental impacts of applying BMPs, the dependent variables or parameters in the BMP studies. We also have the modeling tools related to BMP application against soil erosion. And then there's also a research gap, a wide research gap in the Philippines and other Southeast Asian countries in relation to BMP application against soil erosion, despite the region contributing the most to global erosion, as shown in the figure earlier. And the relationship of key terms and journals of publication locates the current trends for the journals, suggesting a lack and surplus in a particular area. Next is the development of key terminologies showed a transition of studies focusing on traditional practices to emerging conservation practices, as cited from the transition of conservation tillage to a different particular type of practices. And next is the application of BMPs against soil erosion extended to construction activities and other land uses. So this proves the expanding applicability of BMPs and not just focusing on previously on agricultural sites, but also to perhaps urban areas. And then for the recommendations of this study, it would be important to evaluate the implementation of BMPs with the aim of addressing soil and water quality from the soil erosion and sedimentation. So meaning, as mentioned earlier, that soil organic matter, total nitrogen and total phosphorus, to name a few, would be important to assess as a baseline and evaluating the impacts upon application of BMPs. So coming with that, hand in hand, is to assess the various combinations of BMPs for site-specific conditions. So as mentioned, that it's still important to understand the specific conditions of a site prior to evaluating and modeling BMPs, so that there will be an assurance that it most likely would work. Next is the active construction sites can be used as study area because they are highly susceptible to high soil loss rates and sedimentation because of the exposed soils during construction period. And in modeling the effectiveness of BMPs, the SWAT and USLE based models can be utilized. So what does this mean to future directions for the Philippines? So first is we need to estimate the baseline soil loss rates at a finer resolution. So the earlier shown figure for the global soil erosion rates is a coarse resolution. So meaning that an example would be provincial, regional, and the likes. Next, after that, is to evaluate the applicability of BMPs for areas that are highly susceptible to erosion. So upon estimating and establishing a baseline soil loss rate, we need to, as a country, we need to evaluate the applicability of BMPs. And finally, inclusion of BMP site planning for future land development projects. So as shown in these particular figures, we have here exposed soils and eroding channels. So, and this is brought about by land development projects. So it's important that upon movement, upon the inception or the start of a land development, BMPs should also be in place. And these are my references. And that would be all. And thank you for listening and have a great conference. Thank you.